Let's go ahead and transition to the next piece here because these all fit together. Put that Guardian tear sheet up on the screen. Russia's deputy foreign minister is saying that the Russians will treat arms shipments to Ukraine from NATO countries as, quote, legitimate targets for military action in what the Guardian and every other news source I saw described as a dangerous new escalation of tensions. They said Russia had, quote, warned the U.S. that pumping weapons from a number of countries it orchestrates isn't just a dangerous move. It's an action that makes those convoys legitimate targets. Again, why this is so significant is because you're talking about inching closer and closer to direct conflict between NATO countries and the U.S. specifically and Russia. And that is an utter disaster. This comes on top, of course, of Russia saying that our economic warfare is considered, they consider it an act of war. So we have been trying to walk right up to the line and not over of being a co-combatant in this conflict. And Russia is laying down their lines of what that actually means and saying, if you continue to ship in those Javelin missiles and everything else that you're doing, we are going to consider those legitimate targets of attack and we will go after them. So then immediately after they say that, that's when they strike this base miles from the border of Poland, again, showing that they are very serious about this new line and rhetoric that they're drawing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this strike is a direct kind of middle finger to the West with a direct acknowledgement that you're playing with fire here. And if you continue to ship military aid, we are going to consider it a legitimate target. And by the way, if your soldiers happen to be in it or something like that, that's on you, which again brings this to light. Remember that we all brought you that story of the fighter jets, and this was very important because we tried to pressure the Poles and the Romanians to transfer these MiG fighters from their territory to Ukraine. And the Poles and the Romanians were like, no, we're not doing that because they're NATO countries and because they understood that doing so would mark a significant escalation. The other problem is, how do you get them there? You need a Polish fighter to, you know, a NATO pilot to fly into Ukrainian hot airspace, which is contested with Russia. Oh, what could go wrong? The Poles then, bowing to U.S. diplomatic pressure, were like, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll take the fighters and we'll fly them to Ramstein Air Force Base. And then you can fly them from Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany by a U.S. pilot into Ukraine. And Biden was like, we're not doing that.
And
now,
there were people in his administration, including Blinken,
yes,
who wanted him to take that deal. And also reportedly, Poland actually wanted them to do that. And so, I mean, listen, we're plenty critical of Biden here and some of the actions he's taken in this war, but at least according to the reporting, he was the one with the cool head to say, absolutely not. We are not doing
this
that.
Is a key part of my monologue. We are only an aged 79-year-old heartbeat away from a full-blown confrontation with Russia. And this is
you don't think Kamala Harris would keep her cool under pressure, Saagar?
Yeah, well, you know, she's got a great diplomatic
so
track record abroad. And this is part of the, hey, listen, as we covered this weekend, women can, in fact, and do start wars. So that is not something that is outside of the realm of possibility. At the same time, let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. Another aggressive move by the Russians and another line in the sand. They went ahead and struck a facility where they claim 180 foreign mercenaries were killed, and they also destroyed a large amount of foreign weapons. This matters because there's been a string of foreign mercenaries. It's hard to tell exactly how many. There's some, you know, people from Sweden, people from Poland, Romania, the United States, all across kind of the allied West who are flooding into Ukraine. Some of this is just LARPing. Some of it is real in terms of what these mercenaries are, but they are being very much put on notice by the Russians. They're like, hey, we're going to kill you. Like, you are in now an active, hot war zone. There's also been some talk on the Russian side where this also shows some hypocrisy. They're like, hey, it's illegal to have foreign mercenaries. And then they broadcast something from Russia where they said, oh, but Mr. President Putin, there are people from around the world who want to support our forces in Russia. And he's like, well, maybe we'll give them airplanes. So a lot of those people are, you know, they consider themselves brothers in arms from the Syrian civil war. So a lot of pro-Assad forces who, you know, obviously they owe their lives and their entire military success to the Russian military are now putting on, it's hard to tell how much of it astroturfed or not, but I mean, I guess I could see it, you know, both. But there are possibly Syrians that could be flying on Russian planes to come and fight now in this conflict, which the more that we allow this to happen, and I'm not saying we should do anything about it, like militarily, but the more this conflict drags on, this is the same thing that happened in the Syrian civil war. First, it was between Syrians. Then you get all these Arabs start coming in, all this Qatari money and the Saudi money, Libyan arms. I mean, if we start seeing, now we got the Chechen guy in there. So now we got Chechens coming in, and then you have these Syrian forces coming in, and then foreign mercenaries on the western side. This is all a global conflagration waiting to happen. And, it only takes one death here in the United States or one miscalculation in order for the whole situation to go completely sideways. So I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty scared about this whole situation.
That is very true. And actually in Syria, and this could be the case ultimately in Ukraine, there's some indication that this is possible. In Syria, you actually had Chechens fighting on both sides.
Oh yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Chechens
in ISIS.
Right, you had Chechens who were allied with the
players.
Russians. You were Chechens who were allied basically with ISIS, who are, also Islamists who are fighting against Russia because that's their big enemy. And so you can easily see how this spins out of control with all of these people flooding in. And then you add into the mix our massive, indiscriminate flow of weapons into the country, which happened like this. And I know that we've talked to you about this a number of times, but I really don't think we can emphasize enough just how much we have flooded the zone in mere days and now weeks of time. Let's put that New York Times tear sheet up on the screen. They called this comparable to the Berlin Airlift 2.0. That is the scale and scope of just how much we have flooded 17,000 anti-tank weapons, including Javelin missiles, in less than a week over the borders of Poland and Romania. For comparison, back in the summer, when a $60 million arms package to Ukraine was approved, it took months to get that in. It was approved in August. That was not fulfilled until November. But when the president approved $350 million, so a lot more than $60 million, in military aid on February 26th, it took only 5 days until the overwhelming majority of that was put in. So we have really just decided to completely throw any caution to the wind. Thank goodness they decided not to go through with that absolutely foolish scheme regarding fighter jets. You still have lots of politicians who are out there saber-rattling, Tom Cotton and others, pushing for us to get fighter jets to the Ukrainians, ignoring what a potentially disastrous decision that would ultimately be. And now you're starting to see, we've always said, the question is, what will Russia's response be? And we're starting to see the way that they are treating this and viewing this and saying that these will be legitimate targets for their attack.
I think they're probably drawing a line in the sand because they can see this MiG conversation happening in the West. I mean, they're not stupid. They watch the debates and the diplomacy and the back and forth, and they're like, hey, one way in order to deter further military aid is to bomb military aid and consider it a hot target. That's the other thing, which is, do not underestimate. There are a lot of Americans right now in the city of Lviv. I actually have a friend who's in the city of Lviv as a journalist, and he's reporting from there. And apparently the coffee shops, cafes, and all the places with Wi-Fi, basically, are all just foreigners. And so if this place becomes a hot war zone, I mean, this, again, has a serious escalation. We mentioned there was also a American journalist who was killed near the front line. Now, to be clear, nobody knows who shot this guy. They claimed it was the Russians. We don't know. Ukrainian forces were also in the area at the time. He was killed. I think he was shot in the neck, and his partner, cameraman, was shot as well. Apparently, he survived, at least for now, and I hope he continues to do well. But the more that we have those types of incidents, we should not forget one of the impetuses for U.S. involvement in Syria in the Civil War was when one of our American journalists had his head cut off, right? That is what really brought America into that conflict. So foreign aid workers, journalists, and others, if they're going to be in this city, which is receiving tons and tons of military aid from the West, and now the Russians are making it very clear, hey, we're going to bomb the hell out of you while this happens. Again, you see a glimpse of where escalation could come from. So you put all this together, the amount of weapons that are flowing into the country, new diplomatic, wrangling over what. By the way, I don't think these MiGs are still out of the question. I think I think it could still happen.
Yeah.
And NATO and Germany and all of them are going to be pressuring us very hard. It just goes to show you, though, that they forget look, it doesn't matter. If the Poles get attacked, we go to war. If we get attacked, the Poles go to war. We're all in this, in terms of NATO, it's a tripwire for a reason in terms of Article 5. So the debates around all of this are getting very, very close to the line. The Russians are making it clear that they are in a dire military situation.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.